the imperative for change, the shift that's occurring, and then talk about the future and you. So what is the current paradigm? Well, one part of the paradigm is reflected in this photo of Gordon Gekko, seen here in his sweet office, smoking his Joe Camel regulars, wearing his suspenders, buying low and selling high. What was his axiom in the paradigm he represents? Greed is good, and lunches for wimps, but mostly greed is good. Second part of the paradigm is reflected in this photo of Barack and Obama, clearly arguing about which one of them had more magazine covers. And so the paradigm that many subscribe to that this photo represents is that only charity and government can do good. So why is it imperative that we move past this paradigm? Let's think about the challenges that we face. We're faced with many seemingly intractable social and environmental challenges at a local and global level. We're at a very unique moment in human history. We face tremendous challenges, we have a great potential for change, but also a great risk of failure. What are some of those challenges? Poverty, climate change, water scarcity, food production, energy demand, public and private sector transition. Let's look at some of these in detail. This is my hometown, Hamilton, Ontario. It's a place that faces tremendous challenges: a harsh economic transition, environmental devastation from industrial neglect, and a tremendous amount of poverty. Poverty rate is 18% in that community. Many people turn to food banks every month. The major employer in town, Stelco, used to have 25 workers on staff. Today it has more like 2,000, and 900 people were just locked out last year alone. Going further north, Sandy Lake First Nation. It's a remote Ojibwe community. It's only available by plane. 2,500 souls live in this community. And it has a diabetes rate of 1 in 4, an unemployment rate that goes from 25 to 50%. The cost of food is 86% greater than the national average. A loaf of bread would cost you $6. A carton of orange juice would cost you $10. We don't just face poverty at home. This is Somalia, this past year. It really represents the scourge of poverty we face around the world. We know 1 billion people go hungry every day. They were faced with a tremendous drought, the worst of its kind in 60 years. Tens of thousands of people perished. It was made worse by climate change, by conflict, and by poor governance. And it was part of the 5-year trend that East African countries faced, where in a single year the cost of a can of water went up 4 times. We also know we're facing challenges in terms of food production. We may reverse the gains we've made in the Green Revolution. The cost of food in the next 2 decades might go up between 30 and 50%. We might lose 25% of our agricultural production due to climate change and land loss. We might have less food to feed a hungry and growing planet. Governments are also faced with tremendous financial challenges. Total global debt amongst governments is over 40 trillion. That means there's less money for us to provide basic social services, healthcare, and education. This man here will face a lot of cameras in the coming months. Canada is not immune to the global debt that we face. Our global debt, our debt in Canada is $1 billion. Our deficit is $80 trillion, or $80 billion across the country. We will face and enter into a new age of austerity as we see government cutbacks of 5 and 10% to core programs. We'll see a transformation of public services in Ontario and across the country. The private sector is also experiencing tremendous transition. This is Windsor, Ontario. 91 years ago, the first GM car came off the line. At its height, they employed 6,800 workers. Today, no one works for GM in that town. It has an unemployment rate of greater than 10%, and it faces many challenges of poverty. So what is the cost? Well, we know it's costing us more. We have less money, we have less resources, more challenges. Poverty costs us billions of dollars in Canada, between $30 and $35 billion every year. Climate change will cost us by the end of this century between $2 and $4 trillion. The effects of hurricanes, the effects of real estate, increased energy costs. Will also affect hundreds of thousands of lives. Today there are more environmental refugees than refugees caused by conflict. There are 800,000 people that have been displaced due to climate change. So we have a fundamental responsibility to act. We need to change the way we live and the way we do business. And we're already seeing a shift take place. There are a growing number of nonprofit and for-profit ventures that are building businesses to tackle these problems and turning to investors for financing. And there are investors that are now searching for total return. Let's take a look at some of these ventures. This is Seema from Tiffin Day. Tiffin Day is a local food enterprise based in Toronto, provides Indian lunches to hungry office workers in reusable environmentally containers called Tiffins. They source their food locally and sustainably and have it delivered by businesses that actually employ marginalized populations, persons with disabilities. And it gets better. They also oftentimes actually deliver it using zero-emissions e-bikes. Now, I get paid for saying these things, sometimes, actually never, but I just like talking about Tiffin Day because they're really cool. This is D-Light Design. D-Light Design manufactures and sells affordable solar lamps for families and households in the developing world. They provided light to over 2 million individuals in places like India, Kenya, and Tanzania. And the impact is huge. You provide light for children studying at night, you decrease the cost of energy for households, and you eliminate the need for carbon-producing kerosene and candles. This is a woman that came to an eye camp in northern India. 80% of the blind in India suffer from cataracts. You can see by her broken glasses and her eyes. In 1992, a nonprofit organization called Oral Lab was created to manufacture and sell intraocular lenses which are required for cataracts patients. And what they were able to do using innovative price disruption was reduce the cost significantly from $150 a lens to between $2 and $4 per lens, dramatically increasing affordability and access and allowing now 5 million people to have much needed cataract surgery. So what is impact investing and how is it related to this shift? Well, impact investing is an investment approach which aims to solve social and environmental challenges while generating financial return. It's a balance of people, planet, and profit. And so in Canada, it's about $2 billion in assets that are dedicated. Around the world, there's about $100 billion. Investors in companies like Tiffin Day, Oral Lab, or D-Light are impact investors. Now let me show you just a few examples of how this works in practice. This is Regent Park, a community that faced tremendous poverty, tremendous social exclusion. They needed $1 billion in order to revitalize the neighborhood. They had $60 million from government in the form of grants, $500 million in financing from commercial lenders and private interests, left a $450 million gap. So they went and they created a $450 million housing bond at 5% per year over 40 years, which was supported by major investors and major financial institutions. This financing allowed them to create 6,500 units of affordable housing to reshape an entire neighborhood from the ground up. Coming closer to home here in Guelph, Ontario, Planet Bean Coffee, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. Fair trade organic coffee roastery, retailer, and wholesaler. They needed to be able to build a new roastery and expand their retail operations. They got $250,000 in financing from co-op shares and alternative lenders in order to expand their business, grow their revenues from $600,000 to $1.7 million in 4 years, and increase their global and local impact, double their co-op membership size. It was huge. So the concept is very simple. It's impact, energy efficiency, poverty reduction, social housing units, alongside return. It could be principal, or it could be beyond market rate. And there are many major players that are driving this agenda. JP Morgan, the Rockefeller Foundation in the US, RBC, the Gates Foundation, Fan City, and the McConnell Foundation here in Canada. So what does this mean about the future and you? Well, the market potential is tremendous in terms of money and impact. In Canada, it could grow to $30 billion in the next decade. Around the world, it could go to up to $1 trillion in assets. What does that really mean? How many homes, how many units of carbon would be reduced? If you think about what $30 billion could do, that could create 400,000 units of affordable housing, providing people with a safe, comfortable place for them to live, folks that need it most. What does this mean for you? You can become an impact entrepreneur. You can create your own enterprise that drives social and environmental change. You can become an impact financial catalyst, someone that creates products to mobilize private capital for public good. You can be an advocate. You can press government for the necessary change we need in order to grow this marketplace. If you have money, or know people that have money, you can help them be an investor, or you can be an investor in order to place capital where it has impact. And ultimately, I think I'd like you to become an actor, an active part of the process of building this movement. So the take-home message here is this represents an evolution of the future of good. In order for us to be able to achieve real, incremental, and transformative change towards a socially, economically, and environmentally just society, we require government, we require good public policy, we require charity, but we also require impact investing, impact enterprise, and ultimately you to be able to drive this movement.